Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and this is the 9th video in the MapKit with SwiftUI and SwiftData series. In this video, you'll be shown how you can display a route between your current location and one of your selected place marks. And that route can either be by automobile or by walking. In addition, you'll see how you can also provide step-by-step directions. Now remember, you can use the table of contents in the video description if you want to jump to a particular location in the video. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. If you're working along with me, you can continue on from the source code that you completed in the last video. However, if you're jumping in here and you want to work along with me, you can download the project from that last video. Just make sure that you're downloading the branch from video 8. You can see that I've already started a new branch for this video, and the completed source code for this video will be in that branch. Links to both branches are in the description. If you check out the Apple documentation, take a look at the MapKit Directions class, the MK Directions. This is a utility class that computes directions and travel time information based on the route information that you provide. You can see that the initializer requires a request of type mkDirections.request. This will need the start and end points as well as the planned mode of transportation. Well, we could also supply a route preference if we want to avoid things such as tolls and freeways, but I'm going to ignore that. To get directions, you'll need to perform the calculate function, which looks like it has a completion handler. But if I drill down, I see that we can now use an asynchronous method that will provide us with an mkDirections response. Back here, if we check out the response, we can see that it'll provide us with an array of routes, and we're only going to choose the first one to display. Now, if we drill down on the route, we'll see that we get a number of things such as a polyline that we can use to plot the route on the map. I see that I also get an array of steps, but I can also get additional route details such as the distance and the total expected travel time and the transport type. And if I drill down further on steps, I see that for each individual step, we can get written instructions and the distance as well. Those are all of the things that we'll need to know to display our route and directions. So the route is going to be shown in the trip map view. So I'm going to start there by creating a state property called ShowRoute that will be initialized as false. So let me also comment in here to separate my code. We'll be initiating the action for this in our location detail view. So what I'm going to do is to pass in a Boolean as a binding. So where we present our sheet, I'm going to add another property here called ShowRoute that will be the binding to that state property that we just created. So now in location detail view, we'll need to create that Boolean binding property, and I'll give it the same name. And this has to come after the selected placemark state property. And then to stop the previews from complaining, we'll add that argument in, but I'll just use a constant of false to do that in both previews after the selected placemark property. And then for the action for the ShowRoute button that we created in the last video, we can toggle that state property. And also, since we present this from the destination map view, we'll have to fix the sheet presentation there. Now, we won't be showing a route in this view, so we can specify ShowRoute to be a constant of false. To display and clear a route, we'll need 5 more properties in our trip map view after our ShowRoute Boolean. First, we'll create a Boolean property named routeDisplaying that will initialize as false, but set to true when we display a route so that we'll want to clear it if we want. The second is a route, and that's going to be an optional MK route. The third property we'll call route destination, and that's going to be an optional MK map item that we will create from our selected placemark. Now I want to know how long it's going to take me, so we can access the travel time interval. And that's going to be an optional time interval. And then I can create an initial transport type. And this is an MK directions transport type that offers a number of enums, and I'm going to select automobile as the default. So within our struct then for this view, I'm going to create an asynchronous function that will make that async calculate call in MK directions. So we'll call that function FetchRoute and designate it as being async. So first, we'll unwrap the location manager's user location and select the placemark with if-lets. Then I'll create a request, and that's the mkdirections.request. Then I'll create my source placemark by constructing it by creating a mk placemark and provide it with the user location coordinate. The route source then will be an mk map item, and we can create that by passing in that source placemark. Well, we'll have to do a similar thing for our destination. So we'll create a destination placemark by passing in that selected placemark coordinate. And then we can assign to our state route destination property an MK map item created from that placemark. And let's also apply a name from the selected placemark, since we'll want to display this on the map as a special marker. We have what we need now for our request. The request.source is our route source. The request.destination is the route destination. And the request.transport type is what we specified as our default for our transport type state property. It'll be automobile. And now we can create a directions, which is an MK directions object, passing in our request. And then we can get the result by trying and awaiting the call to the directions calculate function. And this will return an array of routes, and we'll just want the first one. The travel interval will be the route's expected travel time. To display the route for a selected placemark, we'll need to toggle that state property on the location detail view. This means that we'll have to have determined a route before we even display that detail view, which means when we tap on and select a location marker. And since this is an asynchronous call, we can observe the change for that selected placemark in a task as long as I provide an ID. And that ID is going to be our selected placemark. But we only want to display a route if that selected placemark has not nil, meaning we haven't tapped off the screen. So if it isn't, we can then set the current route displaying to false. We'll set show route to false, and then set any previous routes to nil. And then we'll await the new route by calling the fetch route. And it'll present the sheet. Now, if on the detail view we toggle the ShowRoute button, we can dismiss the view and then display the route. This can all be done by watching for a change of ShowRoute. And we can use an onChange modifier. So first we can set the selected placemark back to nil, and that will dismiss the detail view. And then if ShowRoute happens to be true, we can, with an animation, assign true to route displaying, and then we can create an unwrapped rectangle from the route's polyline bounding map rect. And use this then to set the camera position to the rectangle around this rect. Now to display the route, we return to the for each loop. Now I only want to show these markers here in the group if we're not showing a route. So I'm going to enclose that in an if clause where if not show route, and have an else. And then within the else clause, I'll use an if let to unwrap the route destination, and then create a marker using the item route destination, which is a map item. And then I'll set the tint to green. Below the for each loop, then we can use an if let to see if we have a route and unwrap it. And make sure that the route displaying is true. And then draw a map polyline using the route polyline. And this will plot the route on the map. And we'll make sure that we use a stroke with a color of blue and set a line width of 6. You can test this out now by doing a search in the preview. I'll search for gas stations. I can select one to bring up the detail view. And then when I tap on the route, the map zooms in and surrounds my route that is displayed with a blue line, and my destination marker is green. Once I've displayed the route, though, I want to remove it. So I want to create another function that I'll call remove route. Within this route, I'll set route displaying to false. I'll set show route to false. I'll set route to nil, and then set my selected place mark back to nil. And then I'll use an if let to unwrap the location manager's user location and call the update camera position to zoom back out again. So inside the safe area inset, in the VSAC for the search field, as a second item, I'm going to create an if clause checking to see if route displaying is true. If it is, I'll create a button using the title clear route, and I'm going to use a system image of xmark.circle. And then for the action, we can call that newly created remove route function. I'll set the button style to bordered, and then to prevent line wrapping, I'm going to be adding a fixed size where the horizontal is true and vertical is false. So let me run this on my simulator now. So let me test this out and find the route to one of my destination markers. I can tap on it to display the detail view, and then tap on the ShowRoute button. The map zooms in, and I can display my route. I can remove the route, and I'm back out again. Well, let me do a search for the closest Starbucks. Oh, well, there's lots of them, so let me choose this one. And I can see the route. Perfect. I just realized that I don't need to use an if let in the remove route to check for the user location. I already do that in the update camera position function, so I can remove it here. Now you may be wondering why I chose to get the route before I even requested it. And that's because I want to be able to show the estimated driving time at that location. And then while I'm there on that detail view, give the user a choice between walking and driving so that I can update the route even from that view. So I have this two state properties already created. So to do this then, we'll have to pass in the travel time interval or the travel interval and the transport type state properties into the location detail view as a binding. So we can change from driving to walking And this updates the route and the travel time. So in the sheet where we present the location detail, add two more properties that will bind to those state properties. One for travel interval and one for transport type. Well, this of course will cause errors because we don't have either of those bindings there in that location detail view yet. So let's add them after the route. A binding for travel interval, which is an optional time interval, and a binding for transport type that is an MK directions transport type. The default was automatic, remember? And then in the Destinations tab preview, we won't be showing the route, so you can add a travel interval and just provide a constant of nil for the binding. And for the transport type, it isn't optional, but we'll specify that constant of automobile anyway, even though we're never going to be using it in that preview or in that destination view. It's the second preview, which is the one that we will be showing the route and supplying a time interval. So we'll need to have a time interval, and I'm just going to provide a constant as an example and specify a time interval of, say, 1,000. And then for the transport type, I'll use that constant automobile. And then in that destinations location map view, where we have that sheet, we'll also have to provide values here, even though we're not going to be using them. So again, for travel interval, I'll provide a constant of nil. And for the transport type, I'll provide the constant of automobile. So now we can return to the location detail view as there are no more errors. And to make things easier to read my code, I'm going to create a computed property that I'm going to call travel time. That's going to be a string. And what I want to do is to first use a guard check to unwrap the travel interval, else I'm going to return nil. Next, I can create a formatter that is a date components formatter. And once I have that formatter, I can specify a unit style, and I'm just going to specify abbreviated. And the formatter, we can specify allowed units, and that's an array. And within the array, I'm just going to choose hour and minute. And that's all I need. So I can return the formatter using the string method from the travel interval. So in the VStack where we show the text fields and text views, I'm going to add another if clause to check to see if the destination is nil. And then within that if clause, create an HStack where I'm going to create two buttons for allowing me to switch between automobile and walking. And then I'll also show the travel time. So the first button will use an image, and we're going to use the system name car. And I'm going to use a symbol variant on this that is conditional based on the transport type. If it's been set to automobile, we'll use the symbol variant with a circle. Otherwise, none. So if it's selected, there'll be a circle around it. And I'll set the image scale to large. And then for the action, we'll set the transport type to automobile. So let me duplicate this button. And then I'm going to change the transport type to walking. The label image, I'll use figure.walk. And then the condition for the transport type will be walking. So a circle will go around that walking figure if it's been selected. And then I can follow this by using an if-let to unwrap the travel time. Remember, it was optional. And then I can create a string that I'm going to call prefix that will compare the transport type to automobile. And if it is an automobile, the string will be driving. Otherwise, it's going to be walking. And then I can use this prefix to create a text view using string interpolation. That's going to start with the prefix, add the string time with a colon, so driving or walking, and then follow that with another string interpolation that displays the travel time. Let me fix that typo for prefix. Then I'll set the font to caption and a foreground style of secondary. Now I can return to Trip Map View and watch for changes on that transport type to fetch new directions, which in turn will get a new route and the travel time. Well, since this is asynchronous, we can use that task method, and the ID will be our transport type, and in the body we'll await that call to fetch route. Now let me run this on the simulator. Well, and I see that I still have some leftover search place marks, so I definitely don't want that to happen. So let me stop now, and I'm going to locate the onAppear block where we update the camera position. And just prior to that, I'm going to make a call to the Map Manager, remove search results, passing in the model context. So let's try that one more time. When I tap on one of my destinations, it's going to open a detail view to see what my driving time is going to be. So let's pick the Rodin Museum. Well, it looks like I've put walk and the drive buttons in the wrong order, so I'm going to fix those in just a minute. So I'll tap on walk, and I'm shown the walking time. And then depending on which of those two are selected, when I tap on show route, that route will correspond to that selection. So I'm displaying here the walking route. So let me clear the route. I'm going to go back again. And this time I'm going to choose driving, much faster. And if I go back and show the route, you'll see a different route is being displayed. So one more thing to do, and that's to add step-by-step directions. But before I do that, let me switch those two buttons around in that detail view. And then as I do that, you'll see in the Trip Map Preview tab, you'll see that's what I want. Well, we're almost done for this video, but I also want to show you how you can get step-by-step directions. So for this, I'm going to present them in another modal sheet that will be triggered by a button next to the Clear Route button. So to initiate this sheet, I'm going to create a new state Boolean property called showSteps that I'm going to initialize as false. And then in the safe area inset, I can surround that Clear Route button with an H-stack. And I'm just going to copy and paste that first button as we want this one to look similar. I'll change the label to say show steps, and then I'm going to provide a system image of location.north. And then the action is going to be to toggle show steps. So I can attach a sheet modifier, and it makes sense for me to attach it right here to this button, and it'll be bound to that show steps with is presented. And then in the closure, I can use an if-lep to unwrap the route, because it's optional. And rather than creating a separate file for this, I should probably do that, but I'm going to be lazy here as it's getting on. I'm just going to create a view right here. So I'll start with a navigation stack. And inside here, I'll create a list. I'm going to set the list style to plain. I'll add a navigation title of steps. And then I'll add a navigation bar title with display mode of inline. As the first row in the list, I'm going to create an H-stack. And here I'll create an image using the system name mappin.circle.fill. I'm going to set the foreground style to red. And then I'm going to follow that in the HStack with a text view, just with the string from my location. And then add a spacer to push it all to the left. Now you may recall that we saw in the documentation that a route has an array of steps, so I can create a for each loop that will iterate from 1 through the route step count. Don't start at 0, start at 1, because that 0 is simply just the starting point. There's no information there that we can use. And then we'll use an ID of self, and that can generate the index that we can use in our closure. So within there, I'm going to create a VStack with an alignment of leading. Well, inside here, I want to present the distance, and I want to display these distances in units like miles or kilometers or yards or meters, depending on what your device's locale is. Well, I've created a gist that has a function that you can use for this purpose. So I'll provide a link in the description. You can simply just get the raw value here and copy that gist to your clipboard. And then what you can do, since this is already created as a static function, just paste it into your Map Manager's service enum so that you can access it. Map Manager really is just a namespace. And then you can use that then to present a text view that uses string interpolation. First, we'll check to see what the transport type is. If it's automobile, we'll start with the string drive. Otherwise, the string will be walk. And then we'll follow that using more string interpolation, where we'll call that new Map Manager distance function that requires us to submit meters, which is what we get from the route.steps at that particular index's distance property. And we'll make it bold. So that's going to give us the drive or walk time. And below that, I'll create another text view that I'll indent slightly with a space, a dash, a space. And then I'll use string interpolation to access the route.steps at that index instructions property. So I'm going to run one more time in the simulator. And I'll tap on one of my destinations, like this Rodin Museum. I'm looking at driving time right now, so let me show the route. Now I can ask to show the steps, and you'll see them. Well, that's it for this video. We'll finish the series in the next one, where I'll show you how you can add more map controls and alter the appearance of the map, perhaps go to satellite. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. If the series isn't quite yet completed, or if you just want to get notifications when I create new videos, consider subscribing to my channel and enabling notifications so that you're notified when new videos drop. All the videos in this series will be in the playlist. Thanks for watching.